Noah Carter slammed his fist down on the kitchen counter so hard the microwave dinner jumped off the tray and splattered across the floor. He stood there breathing hard, a 41-year-old Navy veteran shaking over a plate of frozen turkey on Christmas Eve. Then he heard the small voice behind him, "Daddy!" And he froze. His daughter was watching. And in that second, he realized the man who'd survived 2 deployments couldn't survive one quiet night alone. But here's what nobody knew. The woman who would knock on his door 20 minutes later was about to ask him the strangest favor of his life, and the lie they told would become the only true thing either of them had left. If you're watching this, do me a favor. Drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. And if stories about second chances mean something to you, subscribe, and stay with me to the very end. You won't want to miss what happens on that fire escape. The plate was still on the floor. Noah crouched down slowly like his knees had aged 20 years in the last 20 seconds, and started picking up the pieces of turkey and instant mashed potatoes with a paper towel. He didn't look up. He couldn't. Because Emma was standing in the hallway in her footed pajamas, the ones with the cartoon reindeer on them, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear, and she was looking at him the way kids look at a thing they don't have words for yet. "Daddy, why'd you throw your dinner?" "I didn't throw it, baby. It fell." "It fell up." He almost laughed. 4 years old, and already catching him in lies. "Yeah," he said. "It fell up. Daddy made a mistake. Go back to bed, okay? It's late." "It's Christmas." "Almost. It's Christmas Eve. Christmas is tomorrow." Emma didn't move. She had her mother's eyes. That was the thing that wrecked him a little more every single day. The same wide, dark, serious eyes that used to look at him across a dinner table back when there were 3 plates instead of 1. She wrapped both arms around the rabbit and pressed it to her chest. "Is Mommy coming for Christmas?" Noah stopped wiping the floor. 14 months. 14 months since Sarah had stood in the doorway of their old place with 2 suitcases and said the words that had carved a hole in him that no deployment, no firefight, no funeral had ever managed to carve. "I can't do this, Noah. I'm not built for this. I'm sorry." She hadn't even raised her voice. That was the part that still got him at 2 in the morning. She'd said it the way you'd cancel a dinner reservation. "No, baby," he said quietly. "Mommy's not coming." "Why?" "Because she's far away." "Why?" He set the paper towel down. He looked at his daughter, and he made his face do the thing it had learned to do, the steady thing, the safe thing, the thing that said, "Daddy's got it handled," even when Daddy had nothing handled at all. "Because grown-ups make decisions sometimes," he said, "and they're not your fault. None of it is your fault, you hear me? Now come on, bed." He carried her down the short hallway of the apartment, and she was already half asleep against his shoulder by the time they reached her room, which wasn't really a room, so much as a corner of the second bedroom he'd partitioned off with a bookshelf. He laid her down. He pulled the blanket up. He tucked the rabbit in beside her, because she wouldn't sleep otherwise. "Daddy." "Yeah." "You're not gonna leave, right?" And there it was. The question under all the other questions. The one she'd started asking 3 months ago and hadn't stopped asking since, in 100 different forms, at 100 different hours. "No," Noah said. "I'm never gonna leave. I promise you that. I will be here every single morning when you wake up for the rest of your life until you're so sick of me, you want to throw me on the floor." She giggled. "I won't throw you." "You might. I'm pretty annoying." "You're not annoying. You're my daddy." He kissed her forehead. He stayed there until her breathing went slow and even. And then he stayed a little longer than that, because the apartment on the other side of that bookshelf was waiting for him, and he knew exactly what it had to offer. Nothing. It had nothing to offer. That was the whole problem. When he finally stood up and walked back to the kitchen, the radiator had started its nightly performance, that low metallic knock 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 that the landlord swore he'd fix back in October and hadn't touched since. Noah poured the rest of the ruined dinner into the trash. He stood at the counter and ate 2 slices of bread and a piece of cheese standing up because that was easier than cooking again, and easier than sitting down at a table built for a family that didn't exist anymore. Outside, the city was alive. He could hear it through the thin glass. Somewhere down the block, a group of people were laughing, the loud kind of laughing that comes from being warm and a little drunk and surrounded by people you love. A car horn played the first 3 notes of a Christmas song. Somewhere, a baby was crying and somebody was singing to it. The whole world was full tonight, packed to the edges with light and noise and belonging. And Noah Carter stood in his cold kitchen in the middle of all of it, completely perfectly alone. He told himself he was fine. He'd been telling himself that for 14 months. I'm fine, we're fine. We're getting through it. He told it to his sister when she called from Ohio. He told it to the guys from his old unit in the group text he never answered anymore. He told it to the lady at Emma's daycare who looked at him with those soft, pitying eyes every time he picked Emma up still wearing his work boots, covered in concrete dust. I'm fine. The truth was simpler, and he knew it, and he hated that he knew it. He wasn't living. He was enduring. There was a difference, and he'd learned it the hard way. Living was what he'd done before. Enduring was what you did in a foxhole. Enduring was holding your position and waiting for something to change and knowing in your gut that it wasn't going to. He'd survived war. He genuinely had. He'd come home from places he didn't talk about with all his fingers and all his limbs and a chest full of things that didn't have names. And he'd actually thought that the hard part was behind him. That a marriage and a baby and a job pouring foundations for buildings that would outlast him was the easy part. The reward part. Nobody told him that loneliness could do what mortars couldn't. He was still standing there chewing the last of the bread when somebody knocked on his door. He froze. Nobody knocked on his door. Not as he checked the microwave clock 9:47 on Christmas Eve. The only people who ever came by were the maintenance guy and the kid who delivered the building's mail to the wrong apartments, and neither of them came at night. He set the bread down. He walked to the door. He looked through the peephole, and he saw a woman he recognized barely from across the hall. 4B. He'd seen her maybe a dozen times in the year he'd lived here. Always moving fast. Always with earbuds in, or a phone to her ear, or grocery bags cutting into her fingers. Pretty in a tired way. The kind of person who said, "Hey, how's it going?" without stopping to hear the answer, which suited him fine, because he never wanted to give one. He opened the door. "Hi," she said. "Noah Wright 4A. "Yeah." "Ava. Collins. I'm right across." She pointed at her own door, then dropped her hand like she realized how dumb that was. She was wearing a coat, a nice one, dark green, like she was on her way out somewhere. Her makeup was done. But her eyes were wrong. Noah had spent enough years learning to read faces in bad situations to know when someone was about to fall apart, and this woman was about 90 seconds from falling apart. "Okay," he said. "Hi. Is everything all right? Is there a problem with the building?" No, the building's fine. She laughed a short, panicked laugh and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. "Okay, this is going to sound completely insane. I need you to know up front that I know how insane it sounds, and I wouldn't be here if I had literally any other option, and you can absolutely say no, and I'll never bother you again, I swear." Ava. "But I'm desperate." "I'm actually desperate, which is not a word I use. I'm a very together person. Normally ask anyone." Ava. He said it the way he used to say things to scared 18-year-olds when the world was coming apart around them. Low, steady, an anchor. "Slow down. What do you need?" She took a breath. She looked him dead in the eyes. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend for one night." For a long moment, Noah didn't say anything at all. Behind him, the radiator knocked. Down the hall, a door opened and closed. He stood there in the doorway, in his old gray navy hoodie and his socks holding the edge of the door, and he tried to figure out if he'd heard her right. "You want me to what?" "My family does Christmas Eve dinner. Tonight. In about an hour at my parents' place across town. And 3 weeks ago, when my mother was doing her usual interrogation about my entire life, I told her I was seeing someone, because I couldn't stand the look. You know the look. The poor Ava still alone look. And it came out of my mouth and I couldn't take it back, and now they're expecting me to bring him, to bring you, to bring a guy. Any guy. So lie. Say he's sick. Say he's working. I tried that. I texted my sister this afternoon and said he had the flu, and my mother got on the phone and said, and I quote, "That's fine. We'll save him a plate you bring him by for dessert." And she will not let it go. She will never let it go. And Ava stopped. Her jaw tightened. And he's going to be there. Who's going to be there? My ex. And just like that, the whole thing made sense. Noah had heard that tone before too. He'd heard it from soldiers talking about people they were scared of. There was a particular flatness that came into a person's voice when they said the word for someone who'd hurt them, like the word itself was a landmine they had to set down very, very carefully. My sister invited him, Ava went on. Before we broke up, months ago. They were close, our families. It was a hole, and now he's coming, and he thinks I'm still. And if I show up alone again after I said there was somebody, he's going to look at me with that face he does, and he's going to know, and he's going to... Her voice cracked. She stopped. She pressed her lips together and breathed through her nose until she had it back under control. Noah watched her do it. He recognized that too. The breathing, the clamping down. He did it himself maybe 40 times a day. "I'm not asking you to do anything weird," she said. I just need you to stand next to me. Eat dinner. Say your name's Noah, which it is, so that's not even a lie. Shake my dad's hand. Let me hold your arm. 3 hours tops. And then we come home, and we never speak of it again, and I will literally do anything you want in return. I'll watch your kid. I'll do your laundry for a year. I have money I can pay you. I don't want your money. Then name your price. I'm serious. I have a daughter, Noah said. Ava blinked. Yeah, I know. I've seen her. She's beautiful. It's Christmas Eve. She's asleep. I can't leave a 4-year-old alone for 3 hours to go pretend to be a stranger's boyfriend. I'm sorry. And he meant it. That was the strange thing. He'd expected to feel annoyed or amused or nothing at all. Instead, he felt sorry. Genuinely sorry in a way that surprised him. I can't. It's not that I don't look. I'm not a guy who does this kind of thing. I'm not a performer. I don't lie to people for sport. I'd be terrible at it. I'd ruin it for you. You wouldn't? I would. I'm the worst liar you've ever met. Ask my daughter. She catches me every time. He started to close the door gently, the way you'd close a door on someone you didn't want to hurt. I'm really sorry, Ava. I hope it goes okay tonight. I do. Bring her. He stopped. What? Bring your daughter. Ava had put her hand flat against the door, not pushing it, just stopping it. My family loves kids. My sister has too. My mom would lose her entire mind with joy if a little girl showed up. There'll be presents under the tree she could open. There'll be other kids. There'll be food, a real Christmas dinner, not... Her eyes flicked past him just for a second into the apartment behind him, to the kitchen counter with 2 slices of bread on it, to the cold blue light, to the silence. Not whatever this is, she finished quietly. Noah felt something tighten in his chest. I'm not trying to insult you, Ava said. I swear to God I'm not. I saw your light on. I've been standing in my apartment for 45 minutes trying to talk myself out of coming over here. And the whole time I kept thinking that guy across the hall every time I see him. He's got that little girl on his hip, and he looks like he hasn't slept since the Obama administration, and tonight's Christmas Eve. And his light is on, and he's home. On Christmas Eve. Alone. With a kid. She shook her head. And I thought maybe we're 2 people who both don't want to be where we are tonight. And maybe we could just not be alone, together, for a few hours. Noah looked at her. He didn't say anything, so she kept going quieter now, almost to herself. You shouldn't spend Christmas Eve alone, Ava said. Nobody should. Not you. Not that little girl in there. Not... She stopped. Swallowed. Not me. And that was the thing that did it. Not the favor. Not the desperation. Not the money she'd offered, or the laundry, or the absurdity of the whole situation. It was 4 words said by a stranger in a green coat at 9:45 on the worst night of the year. You shouldn't spend Christmas Eve alone. Because he'd been telling himself the opposite for 14 months. He'd been telling himself that alone was fine. That alone was strong. That a man who'd done what he'd done and seen what he'd seen didn't need anybody, that he could hold the line forever, just him and Emma and the knocking radiator, and that this was just how his life was now, and he should be grateful for it, because at least he had his daughter, and a lot of men came home with less. He'd been telling himself he was fine. And here was a complete stranger looking at him like she could see straight through that, like she could see the bread on the counter and the empty chairs, and the man crouched on the floor 20 minutes ago picking up his own dinner, and she wasn't pitying him. That was the thing. She wasn't pitying him. She was recognizing him, like she'd looked across the hall and seen her own reflection. She's asleep, Noah heard himself say. Ava went very still, like she was afraid any sudden movement would scare him off. We can wake her gently, or carry her. She can sleep in the car, sleep at my parents', whatever. My mom has a whole guest room set up for the nieces. She has a thing about new places. Since her mom left, she gets scared. Then I'll make sure she's not scared, Ava said simply. I'm good with scared. I have a lot of practice. Noah looked back over his shoulder into the apartment. At the bookshelf partition. At the corner where his daughter was sleeping with a stuffed rabbit in a home he'd tried so hard to make warm and had only managed to make survivable. He thought about tomorrow morning, about Christmas, about the 2 presents he'd wrapped badly and hidden in his closet, and the breakfast he'd planned to make, and the long, long quiet day that would stretch out after it with nothing in it but the 2 of them and the television, and the unbearable grinding effort of pretending to a 4-year-old that everything was okay. He thought about Emma waking up tomorrow and asking again if Mommy was coming. And he thought, maybe she needs this more than I do. Maybe a kid should get to see a real Christmas, real food, a tree, presents, people laughing. Maybe she should get to remember that the world is like that, even if her own house can't be even just for one night. That was how he justified it to himself. He'd realize later that it wasn't really the reason at all. But it was the reason he gave himself in the doorway, and it was enough. This is insane, he said. It's completely insane, Ava agreed. It's the most insane thing I've ever done. My therapist is going to have a field day. I'm not good at lying. You won't have to lie. You'll have to stand there and be quiet and intimidating, which frankly, you look like you do for a living. I pour concrete for a living. Even better, my dad will love you. He builds birdhouses. It's a whole personality. She was talking fast now, the relief making her giddy, and Noah found to his complete surprise that the corner of his mouth was trying to do something it hadn't done in a long time. Turn up. Is that a yes? Please tell me that's a yes, because I have to leave in 20 minutes and I need to figure out a story for how we met. We met across the hall, Noah said. That's the story. It's true. It's the only part of this I'll be able to say without my face giving me away. Okay, we met across the hall. That's good. That's actually really sweet. Ava's eyes widened slightly, like she'd surprised herself. Neighbors. Single dad and the girl across the hall. People love that. People aren't going to love anything because I'm going to say 4 words all night and then we're going to leave. That's fine. The strong silent thing plays. Trust me. She was already backing toward her own door. 20 minutes. Dress, I don't know, dress like you're meeting parents. Do you own a sweater? I own a sweater. Wear the sweater. And Noah. She stopped halfway across the hall and the giddiness dropped out of her voice all at once, and for a second she just looked at him, really looked at him the way she had a minute ago. Thank you. I mean it. I know what I'm asking. I know it's strange. I didn't have anyone else. I don't have a single other person I could have asked. Her voice wobbled. She steadied it. And you said yes. So, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Noah said. I might be terrible. You won't be terrible. She opened her door. You're a terrible liar, you said so yourself. Honest people make the best fake boyfriends. Nobody believes the smooth ones. and then she was gone into 4B, leaving him standing in the doorway in his socks. Noah closed the door slowly. He leaned his back against it. He stood there in the quiet of his apartment, the radiator knocking the city, laughing through the glass, and he tried to understand what had just happened. He'd just agreed to put on a sweater, wake up his sleeping daughter, and drive across town on Christmas Eve to pretend to be the boyfriend of a woman he'd spoken to maybe 4 times in his life, in front of her family, in front of a man she was clearly terrified of. It was the most reckless thing he'd done since he took off the uniform. And underneath the disbelief, underneath the, "What am I doing?" there was something else. Something he hadn't felt in so long that it took him a second to even recognize it. It moved in his chest, small and warm, and almost painful, like blood coming back into a limb that had gone numb. He was looking forward to something. For the first time in 14 months, there was a thing on the other side of the next hour that wasn't just more silence. There was a place to go, people to meet, a reason to put on the sweater and comb his hair and look at himself in the mirror like a man who still belonged to the world. He didn't trust it. He didn't understand it. A complete stranger had knocked on his door with a crazy request, and somehow that had cracked something open in him, and he wasn't sure he wanted it cracked open, because cracked open things could be hurt again, and he had built 14 solid months of not being able to be hurt again. He pushed off the door. He went to his closet. He found the sweater. Dark blue, a Christmas gift from Sarah 2 years ago, still half decent, and he held it in his hands for a second, then put it on anyway, because it was the only one he owned, and there was no time for ghosts. Then he went to wake his daughter. She stirred when he touched her shoulder, surfacing slowly, blinking up at him in the dark. "Daddy." "Hey, baby. Hey, I need you to wake up for me, okay? Just a little. We're going on an adventure." "It's nighttime." "I know. It's a special nighttime adventure. We're going to a Christmas party." Emma sat up instantly, more awake the way only a 4-year-old can go from dead asleep to fully operational at the word party. A Christmas party with a tree. With a tree, and other kids, and presents you can open, and real food, the kind with mashed potatoes that don't come from a box. Is Mommy gonna be there? The question again. It never stopped coming, but this time, for some reason, it didn't land the same way. Maybe because for once, Noah had a better answer than no. "No, baby. But our new friend Ava's gonna be there. She lives right across the hall. You've seen her, and her whole family, and they're really excited to meet you." "Why?" "Because you're you. Come on, let's find your good shoes. The sparkly ones. The sparkly ones." Emma scrambled out of bed. The rabbit forgotten already, talking a mile a minute about whether there would be cookies, and whether the other kids would be nice, and whether she could open all the presents, or just some of the presents. And Noah found himself moving faster than he'd moved in months. Pulling her good dress over her head, finding the sparkly shoes, wrestling her hair into something that resembled order. And the apartment, for the first time in he didn't know how long, was full of noise. Good noise. The noise of a child getting ready to go somewhere wonderful. He caught sight of the two of them in the hallway mirror as they headed for the door. Him in his blue sweater, Emma in her good dress and sparkly shoes. Both of them flushed and a little frantic and alive. And he stopped for half a second, just half a second, and looked. He didn't recognize the man in the mirror. The man in the mirror looked like he was going somewhere. Like he had a reason. Like maybe somewhere under 14 months of enduring, there was still a man in there who knew how to live. "Daddy, come on," Emma said, tugging his hand. "We're gonna miss the party." "We're not gonna miss the party," Noah said. He grabbed his keys off the hook. He grabbed the 2 badly wrapped presents from the closet, because it occurred to him that a man who showed up to a family's Christmas with nothing wasn't much of a man at all, and maybe a kid should have something to put under the tree. He grabbed Emma's coat and his coat, and then he stood at the door with his daughter's small warm hand in his, and his heart doing something complicated and unfamiliar in his chest. He'd survived war. He'd survived his wife walking out the door. He'd survived 14 months of enduring, and he had absolutely no idea, None that the woman across the hall in the green coat, the one he'd said yes to out of pity and loneliness, and the simple, unbearable wish to not be alone for one single night, was about to change the entire shape of his life. That the lie they were about to tell would crack open in the worst possible way, in front of the worst possible person, and that out of the wreckage of it, something real and terrifying and good was going to grow. He didn't know any of that yet. All he knew was that for the first time in a long time, when he opened the door, he wasn't stepping out into the cold to endure something. He was stepping out to live it. "Okay, Emma," he said, and his voice was steady, and for once it wasn't pretending. "Let's go meet some people." And he opened the door. The car ride across town was quieter than Noah expected, mostly because Ava wouldn't stop talking. "Okay, so we need a story," she said from the passenger seat, twisting around to check on Emma, who was buckled into the borrowed booster seat Ava had produced from somewhere with a kind of frantic competence that told Noah she'd thought of everything, except the part where she'd have to actually go through with it. "How long have we been dating?" my mom's going to ask. She asks everything. She'll want a timeline. She'll want to know what your intentions are. She asked my cousin's boyfriend what his credit score was. 2 months. Noah said, eyes on the road. "We met across the hall. We've been seeing each other 2 months, and I don't talk about my finances at dinner." 2 months is good. 2 months is believable. 2 months is wait. Why 2 months specifically? Because it's long enough that it's real, and short enough that nobody expects me to know your middle name. It's Renee. I don't need to know your middle name. You might. He'll test you. He does that. He'll ask you something he knows the answer to just to see if you'll get it wrong. Ava said he the same flat way she'd said it in the hallway, and Noah noticed her hands had found the hem of her coat and started worrying it again, folding it and unfolding it. He's like that. He turns everything into a quiz you didn't study for. Then he can fail me. I don't care if your family thinks I'm a great boyfriend, Ava. I just have to be a present one. There's a difference. She looked at him for a second sideways in the passing light of the street lamps. "You're weirdly good at this for somebody who said he was bad at it." "I'm not lying yet," Noah said. "It's easy before you have to do it." From the back seat, a small voice cut in. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" The car went quiet. Ava turned all the way around. She said. "I'm Emma, right? I'm Ava. I'm your daddy's friend. We're going to a party at my house, my mom and dad's house. My daddy doesn't have girlfriends," Emma announced with the absolute conviction of a 4-year-old stating a law of physics. "He has me." Noah laughed before he could stop himself. A short, surprised bark of a laugh, the kind that came out of him so rarely these days that it almost felt like coughing. "That's right, baby. I have you. And Ava's coming because she's your friend." "That's right." "Okay," Emma said, satisfied, and went back to looking out the window at the lights. Ava settled back into her seat, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then quietly she said, "She's something. She's everything." Noah said, and he didn't mean for it to come out as heavy as it did, but it did, and Ava didn't say anything cute back. She just nodded like she understood and looked out her own window. The house when they got there was the kind of house Noah used to imagine before everything went wrong. 2 stories lit up like a postcard, every window glowing gold, a wreath on the door, and those electric candles in the windowsills, and a lawn full of the cheerful, slightly tacky inflatable decorations that meant a family had kids in it once and never quite stopped. Cars lined the whole street. He could hear music from inside before he even turned off the engine. "Okay," Ava said, and she didn't move to get out. Her hand was on the door handle, but she didn't open it. "Okay, here's where I tell you it's not too late to turn around." "You're not turning around." "No." "But you could. I'd understand. I'd find a way to explain it. I'd say you got called into work. Ava." He turned the engine off. The car ticked in the cold. "Look at me." She looked at him. "You came to my door tonight because you didn't want to do this alone," he said. "So you're not doing it alone. I'm right here. I'll be right next to you the whole time. You don't have to be brave by yourself. That's the whole deal. That's the only thing I'm actually here to do." He watched something move across her face, surprise mostly, and under it, something that looked almost like grief, like she wasn't used to being told she didn't have to do the hard thing alone, like the offer was a language she'd half forgotten. Her eyes went bright. She blinked it back fast, the way he'd seen her do in the hallway. "You're really bad at being a fake boyfriend," she said thickly. "That was a real boyfriend thing to say." "I told you I'd be bad at it." "Yeah, well..." She wiped under her eye with one knuckle, careful of the makeup. "Don't do it again, or I'll cry in front of my mother, and she'll think you proposed." She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and put on a face. Noah watched her do. It watched her assemble the bright, capable, "I'm so happy to be here" version of herself piece by piece, like a soldier checking gear before going outside the wire. "Okay, let's go. Get the kid. Smile. We're in love and everything's great." "Everything's great." Noah agreed and got out to unbuckle his daughter. The door opened before they were halfway up the walk, and a woman who could only have been Ava's mother filled the doorway with light spilling out behind her. "There she is. Ava Renee Collins, you said." 7. And it's almost 9. And then she saw Noah, and then she saw Emma, and the entire shape of her changed in an instant, the scolding dropping away into pure, undiluted delight. "Oh, well, hello. And who is this?" "Mom." Ava said, "This is Noah, and this is his daughter Emma." "Noah," her mother said. And the way she said it, turning the name over, weighing it, looking at him with eyes that missed absolutely nothing, told Noah everything he needed to know about where Ava got her habit of reading people. "Noah, it is so nice to finally meet you. Ava's told us almost nothing because Ava tells us nothing, but she told us enough." She stuck out her hand. "Diane, I'm the mother. Come in, you're letting the cold in, and good Lord, look at this little angel." Emma had retreated halfway behind Noah's leg, gripping a fistful of his jeans, peering up at the bright, loud stranger in the doorway, with the wary, frozen expression Noah knew too well. It was the look she got at daycare drop-off. The look she got whenever the world presented her with something new, and she had to decide whether it was going to take something away from her. Noah crouched down to her level, right there on the walk. "Hey," he said quietly, just to her. "You see all those lights? You see the tree in the window? There's gonna be cookies in there and other kids, and you don't have to talk to anybody, you don't want to. You can hold my hand the whole time." "Okay, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here." Emma looked at him. Then she looked at Diane, who had to her enormous credit crouched down too, all the way down to the cold walkway in her nice Christmas dinner clothes, so that she was at eye level with a 4-year-old. "I have a question for you," Diane said to Emma, very seriously, woman to woman. "Do you like dogs?" Emma's eyes went wide. "You have a dog." "I have a very old, very fat, very sweet dog named Biscuit, who has been waiting his whole life for a little girl exactly your size to come scratch his belly. He's right inside by the fire. Would you like to meet him?" There was a long pause while Emma weighed this against every fear she had. And then slowly, her hand came loose from Noah's jeans. "Is he nice?" "He's the nicest dog in the whole world," Diane said. "He's nicer than most people I know." "Okay," Emma whispered. And she took Diane's offered hand, and just like that, after 14 months of Noah barely being able to get her to leave his side at a birthday party, she walked into the house holding a stranger's hand off to meet a dog named Biscuit. Noah stood up slowly. He realized his throat was tight. "She's good with kids," Ava said beside him low. "She raised 4 of us. She's basically a professional." "Yeah," Noah managed. "I see that." They went in. The inside of the house hit him like a wall heat and noise, and the smell of a turkey that had clearly been cooking all day. Cinnamon and pine and somebody's perfume. A fire actually crackling in an actual fireplace. A tree in the corner so loaded with ornaments and lights that it leaned slightly to one side. And people. So many people. A pack of kids ran through the living room shrieking. A football game played silently on a TV nobody was watching. Somewhere a baby was being passed around. It was chaos, the good kind, the kind Noah hadn't stood inside of since he couldn't remember when. Since before. Since another life. For one disorienting second, he just stood in the entryway and let it wash over him, and the loneliness he'd been carrying around for 14 months pressed up so hard against all this warmth that it nearly took his legs out from under him. He'd forgotten. That was the thing nobody told you. You forgot what it felt like, so that when you walked back into it, it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like an ambush. A hand landed on his shoulder. He turned half-braced old reflexes and found himself looking at a big man in a Christmas sweater with a face like worn leather and eyes exactly like Ava's. "You the boyfriend," the man said. Not a question. "Yes, sir. Noah Carter. Frank, her father." Frank shook his hand, and his grip was a test, the way some men's grips always were, and Noah passed it without thinking, his own hand still hard from years of work and years before that of something harder. Frank's eyebrows went up a fraction. "Carter. What do you do, Noah Carter? Structural engineer. Mostly commercial foundations now. I pour concrete frame buildings, make sure things don't fall down. Make sure things don't fall down." Frank nodded slowly like he was filing it away. "And before that? You've got a before that. I can see it on you." Noah hesitated half a beat. "Navy, sir. 8 years." The change in Frank was small but total. The testing went out of his eyes. "Where?" "Couple places I don't talk about much." "Good answer," Frank said quietly. "I was Army. Long time ago. Different war." He gave Noah's shoulder one more squeeze, harder this time, and there was something in it that wasn't a test anymore. "Glad you came. She doesn't bring people around. Hasn't in a long time. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." And he turned and bellowed into the next room. "Diane, where'd you put the boy's drink? Get this man a beer. He's a sailor. He's earned it." Ava appeared at Noah's elbow, having shed her coat, looking like a different person in a dark red dress, and she leaned in close enough that her breath was warm against his ear. "What did he say to you?" "He likes me." "He does not like you. He's never liked anyone." "He likes me. We're both veterans. We've already bonded. He called me the boy." Ava pulled back and stared at him. "He called you the boy. He calls family the boy. He called my brother-in-law that guy for 6 years. She shook her head, dazed. "You've been here 90 seconds. I told you. Honest people make good fake boyfriends." But Noah found he couldn't quite hold the joke because over Ava's shoulder in the living room, his daughter was sitting on the floor next to an enormous golden dog, both hands buried in its fur, laughing, actually laughing, head back, the full-body laugh he hadn't heard from her in so long that the sound of it landed in him like a blow. A little girl, maybe 6, had sat down next to her and was showing her something, and Emma was nodding along, and the wariness was just gone. Burned off in the heat of the room like fog. "Hey," Ava said softly, following his gaze. "You okay?" "Yeah," Noah said. "Yeah, she hasn't laughed like that in a while. That's all." "How long's it been since her mom?" 14 months. Ava nodded slowly. She didn't say "I'm sorry," which Noah was grateful for because he was sick to death of "I'm sorry." She just stood next to him and watched his daughter pet a dog and let the silence be a kind one, and after a moment she said, "She's safe here. I promise you that. Whatever else is messed up about my family, and there's a lot, the one thing they do right is kids. Nobody's gonna let anything happen to her. She can run around and eat too much sugar and pass out under the tree, and a dozen people will keep half an eye on her without even thinking about it. That's the one thing about a house like this. There's always somebody watching. That's the part I didn't know I needed," Noah said before he could think better of it. "Somebody else watching. It's just been me. For 14 months, it's just been me watching. You can't ever fully relax when it's just you. You're the whole net. If you drop her, there's nobody underneath." He stopped, surprised at himself. He didn't talk like this. He didn't talk at all, mostly. Sorry, that's more than you asked for. No, Ava said. It's not. And the way she looked at him then was different than before. Not the giddy relief, not the gratitude. Something steadier. Like she was actually seeing him, and what she saw didn't scare her off. It's exactly what I asked for, actually. I asked you to be real. You're being real. Most people can't even when they're not pretending. Frank came back and shoved a beer into Noah's hand and dragged him off to look at a birdhouse he was building in the garage, which was apparently both a real birdhouse and a personality exactly as Ava had warned. And for the next hour, Noah found himself folded into the machinery of a family Christmas in a way he hadn't been in years. He admired the birdhouse. He helped Frank carry a folding table up from the basement. He got introduced to aunts and uncles and a brother of Ava's named Danny, who was loud and warm and clearly the favorite, and a sister. The sister he watched more carefully because Ava had warned him about the sister too. Protective, she'd said. She'll be the one who's suspicious. Her name was Claire, and she was older than Ava, sharper around the edges with 2 kids of her own, and the particular tired vigilance of a woman who'd appointed herself the family's early warning system. She cornered Noah by the drinks table maybe 40 minutes in, while Ava was across the room being interrogated by Diane. So? Claire said. Noah? Claire. You know my sister 2 months. Little over 2 months. You know what she's been through. Noah set his beer down. He looked at Claire, and he made a decision fast the way he'd learned to make decisions, that the truth, or at least a true-shaped thing, was going to serve him better here than any rehearsed story. I know enough to know somebody hurt her, he said quietly. I know she doesn't talk about it. I know there's a guy coming tonight who she's scared of even though she'd never use that word, and I know I'm not going to let anything happen to her in front of me. That's about as far as my knowledge goes. But it's the part that matters. Claire stared at him for a long moment. Something in her jaw loosened. He really did a number on her? She said low, glancing across the room to make sure Ava wasn't in earshot. Marcus, the ex. He's coming because I invited him months ago before she finally told me what it was actually like. And now I can't uninvite him without making it a whole thing, and I have been sick about it for 2 weeks. She picked at the label on a wine bottle. She doesn't know I know how bad it was. She told me one thing, and I figured out the rest. The way she'd flinch when her phone buzzed. The way she stopped, she used to be loud. Like Danny. She stopped being loud. She's pretty loud tonight, Noah said. She talked the whole car ride here. Claire's eyes came up to his, surprised, and then slowly she smiled, the first real smile she'd given him. Yeah. Wouldn't shut up. Tried to make me memorize her middle name. It's Renee. So I've been told. Claire laughed a real laugh, and the last of the suspicion went out of her. She picked up her wine. Okay, Noah, okay. I don't know what you are exactly. 2 months single, dad shows up on Christmas Eve with a kid. My dad already likes you, which has literally never happened. But whatever you are, you got her talking again. So you're all right with me. She started to move off, then turned back. Just when he gets here. Marcus. Stay close to her. He's good at finding the cracks. He'll smile the whole time he's doing it. Don't let the smile fool you. I won't, Noah said. Dinner's in 20, Claire said, and was gone. He found Ava again by the tree where Emma had migrated, the little girl now thoroughly at home lying on her stomach on the floor with the 6-year-old, the 2 of them shaking presents and guessing what was inside. Ava was sitting on the arm of the couch, watching them with an expression Noah couldn't read. Your sister approves of me, he said, sitting down on the couch beside her. I saw. What did you say to her? The truth, mostly. It keeps working. It's very confusing. That's because nobody in my family expects it. Ava was quiet for a second, watching Emma. Then she said, not looking at him. She's having the time of her life. Yeah. When's the last time she had a Christmas like this with all this? Noah considered the question. Last year doesn't count. Sarah had just left. I don't even remember last Christmas, honestly. I think I made spaghetti, and we watched a movie, and I cried in the bathroom, and told her I had something in my eye. He said it flat, Plain a fact. Year before that, we were still a family, but it wasn't like this. It was nice, but it was 3 people in an apartment. It wasn't this. I don't think Emma's ever been inside a Christmas like this in her whole life. Ava turned and looked at him, and there was something stricken in her face. Then I'm glad, she said. I'm glad I knocked. Even if it's a disaster. Even if it all falls apart in there at dinner. She got this. She got one of these. She nodded toward Emma, who at that exact moment let out a peal of laughter at something the other little girl had said, and the sound of it carried over all the noise of the house. That's worth it. Whatever happens, that right there is worth the whole insane thing. Noah didn't trust his voice for a second. Ava, he said finally. Yeah, why'd you really knock on my door? She blinked. I told you. You needed a fake boyfriend. I know, but you said yourself your family's full of people. You've got a brother, you've got cousins, you could have asked a friend, a coworker, somebody you actually know. You knocked on the door of a man you've spoken to 4 times. A guy with a kid. On Christmas Eve. Why? Ava was quiet for a long moment. Across the room, Diane called that the turkey was coming out, and people started drifting toward the dining room, but neither of them moved. Because you'd understand, she said finally very quietly. I don't know how to explain it better than that. Every time I saw you in the hall, you had this look. This, I'm holding it together because I have to look. And I knew that look because I see it in the mirror. And I thought if I have to walk into that room tonight and pretend everything's fine in front of the person who taught me how to pretend everything's fine, I want somebody next to me who knows it's pretending, who won't believe my own act. Because if even my fake boyfriend believes I'm fine, then I'm really truly alone in there. She finally looked at him. Does that make sense? Or is that insane too? It makes sense, Noah said. It's the same reason you said yes, she said. Isn't it? You didn't say yes for me. You said yes because you didn't want to be alone either, and I was somebody who could see it. Noah opened his mouth, closed it. There was no point in lying. She'd already named it the same way she'd named it standing in his doorway. Yeah, he said. That's why I said yes. Pretend survivors, Ava said softly, almost to herself, like she was trying the phrase out. That's us. A couple of pretend survivors faking our way through one dinner. Dinner! Diane bellowed from the other room. Ava, Noah, get in here. You two can stare at each other after we eat. Ava huffed a laugh and stood smoothing her dress, and the bright, capable mask slid back over her face. But it was thinner now, Noah noticed. He could see through it. Maybe he was the only one in the house who could. Come on, she said, holding out her hand. Showtime. Hold my hand. Look besotted. And for the love of God, if my mother asks what your intentions are, do not say you pour concrete. Noah took her hand. It was the first time he'd held it. It was smaller than he expected, and colder than it should have been, and he felt her grip tighten around his, with a pressure that had nothing to do with the act. A real grip. A don't let go grip. And he closed his hand around hers and held on. I've got you, he said quietly. Whatever happens in there, I've got you. I know, she said. And the surprising thing, the thing that stayed with him later, was that she said it like she actually believed it. Come on, let's go eat with my crazy family. They walked into the dining room together hand in hand, and the long table was loaded with everything Noah had stopped letting himself imagine. The turkey, the potatoes, the dishes that had clearly been somebody's grandmother's recipes. Candles lit a dozen mismatched chairs, crammed in close, and a place set for him, and a booster seat already set up for Emma between Diane and the 6-year-old, like she'd been coming to this table her whole life. Frank was carving. Danny was telling a story too loud. Claire was wrangling a toddler. And for one suspended moment, standing in the doorway of all that warmth, with a near stranger's hand in his, and his daughter laughing in the middle of it, Noah felt the thing he'd been so afraid to feel. He felt like he belonged somewhere. It was a lie. He knew it was a lie. He was a hired hand, a man playing a part for one night, and tomorrow he'd be back across the hall eating bread over a counter. But standing in that doorway, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like the truest thing that had happened to him in 14 months, and that terrified him more than anything that had happened to him in any war, because a thing this good had only one way to go, and Noah Carter knew better than anyone alive how it felt to have the good thing taken away. "Sit, sit, everybody sit," Diane was saying. "Frank, say the thing, say the blessing, the food's getting cold." They sat. Noah pulled out Ava's chair without thinking about it, and caught Diane noticing, and caught Diane's face go soft, and understood that he'd just passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. He sat down beside Ava. Across the table, Emma was already reaching for a roll, and Diane was guiding her hand to put it on a plate. First, gentle, patient, grandmotherly, and Emma was looking up at her with open, easy trust. Frank cleared his throat. The table quieted. "All right," he said. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for this family. Thank you for the new faces at our table tonight." His eyes flicked just once to Noah and Emma. Because a table with more chairs full is a table that's doing its job. Thank you for bringing everybody home safe. Amen. Amen, the table murmured. And that was the exact moment the doorbell rang. Noah felt Ava go rigid beside him. Felt her hand find his under the table and grip it hard enough to hurt. Around the table, he watched the warmth flicker. Claire's eyes came up sharp. Diane's smile tightened at the corners. Frank's jaw set. The doorbell rang again. "I'll get it," Danny said, pushing back his chair, oblivious cheerful. "Probably Marcus. Said he might swing by." "Don't," Ava said. It came out too fast, too sharp, and a couple of heads turned. She recovered, forced the brightness back. "I mean, I'll get it. I should get it." But she didn't move. Her hand was a vice around Noah's. Her face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Noah leaned in close, his mouth at her ear, his voice low enough that only she could hear it. "Hey, look at me." She turned. Her eyes were wide, and her breathing had gone shallow and quick, the breathing of someone right at the edge. "I'm right here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to do this part alone either. Whatever he says, whatever he does. He has to get through me first, and he's not getting through me. You understand?" Ava stared at him, and slowly, her breathing steadied. The vice on his hand loosened just slightly into something that was holding on instead of drowning. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," Noah said. He stood up, still holding her hand, drawing her up with him. "Come on. We'll answer it together." And together, hand in hand, the two of them walked toward the door, toward the man waiting on the other side of it, while behind them the whole table watched in a silence that had crept in under the Christmas music, the silence of a family that knew every single one of them, that the warmth in the room was about to be tested by the cold thing standing on the porch. Ava opened the door, and there he was. Marcus filled the door frame the way a salesman fills it, easy. Smiling, holding a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag of presents in the other, dusted with the cold off the porch. He was handsome, in a way that worked on a room-dark coat, good haircut, the kind of man who'd practiced his whole life at being liked. And his eyes went to Ava first, warm, familiar, proprietary, before they slid to the man standing beside her with her hand in his. "Ava," Marcus said, "you look incredible. God, it's been—" He stepped forward like he was going to hug her, and Noah felt Ava's whole body tense, and without thinking about it, Noah shifted his weight just slightly, just enough that his shoulder came forward, and Marcus's path to her closed. It wasn't aggressive. It looked to anyone watching like a man simply standing next to the woman he was with. But Marcus felt it. Noah saw him feel it. Marcus stopped. The smile didn't move. "And who's this, Noah?" Ava said. Her voice was steady, which Noah knew cost her something. "My boyfriend. Noah, this is Marcus, an old friend of the family." "Old friend of the family." Marcus repeated it like he was tasting it, and the smile got a little wider, a little colder. "That's generous. Boyfriend, huh? Well." He stuck out his hand. "Marcus, pleasure." Noah shook it. Marcus squeezed the same test Frank had given him. But where Frank's had been a question, Marcus's was a challenge, a man trying to find out something. Noah let his own hand stay relaxed, easy, and just didn't give. Didn't squeeze back, didn't flinch, just let his grip sit there like a slab of poured foundation, immovable, while Marcus pressed harder and got nothing back. Got no rise, no reaction, until it was Marcus who had to let go first, or look like he was trying too hard. He let go. "Strong grip," Marcus said lightly. "You too," Noah said, which was a lie, and they both knew it was a lie, and that was the first move in a game that was now officially being played. "Marcus," Danny called from the dining room. "Get in here, man. You're letting the cold in. We just sat down." "Coming, coming." Marcus stepped inside, and the warmth of the house swallowed him. And Noah watched the man transform, the smile widening the shoulders, loosening the whole performance of the beloved family friend, snapping into place as he handed off the wine to Diane and the presents to a kid, and clapped Frank on the back, and called Claire by a nickname she clearly hated. He was good. Noah had to give him that. He worked the room like a man running for office, and within 90 seconds, half the table had forgotten there was anything uncomfortable about him being there at all. But not all of them. Claire was watching him with flat, careful eyes. And Ava. Ava had gone quiet beside Noah as they walked back to the table. The loudness from the car ride completely gone, folded back up inside herself. And Noah felt it happen, felt her shrink, and he hated it. He'd known her for 3 hours, and he already hated watching her shrink. They sat. Marcus took the empty chair across the table, and one seat down, which put him almost directly across from Ava, close enough to talk to her, close enough to watch her, and Noah understood that it was not an accident. Marcus did nothing by accident. "So," Marcus said once the food was moving and the noise had come back up. He said it to the table, but his eyes were on Noah. "Noah, what is it you do, Noah?" "Structural engineer." "Engineer. Nice. Stable." Ava always did go for the stable type. Marcus smiled around a forkful of turkey. "Until she didn't anyway." He let that sit for half a second. A little hook dropped in the water before he reeled it back with a laugh. "Kidding. Old joke. How long have you two been?" "Couple months," Noah said. "Couple months. Huh. And she's already bringing you home for Christmas, meeting the parents. That's fast." Marcus turned to Diane. "Isn't that fast? Diane, Ava used to make me wait 6 months before I even met you." Diane's smile was thin. "Times change, Marcus." "Sure they do. Sure they do." Marcus turned back to Noah, his head cocked, friendly as a snake. "So what's the deal? You live nearby?" "How'd you two even meet? Ava's not exactly the type to swipe right on a guy." "We're neighbors," Noah said. "Across the hall." "Across the hall. So you just knocked on her door one day?" "She knocked on mine." It came out before Noah could think about whether it was strategically wise, and he felt Ava go still beside him. Because it was true. It was the truest sentence either of them had said all night. She knocked on mine, and Marcus didn't know how true it was, but it landed anyway, because Ava heard it. She heard it. And under the table, her hand found Noah's knee, for half a second. A quick pressure gone before anyone could see. And Noah understood it as a thank you. "She knocked on yours," Marcus said. "Bold. That's not the Ava I knew. The Ava I knew didn't make the first move on anything." He cut his food. "But people change, I guess. Or maybe she just found the right guy to chase." The smile again. "No offense." "None taken," Noah said. "Marcus," Claire said sharply from down the table. "How's work?" It was a deliberate redirect, and Marcus took it gracefully, launching into something about a promotion, a corner office, a deal he'd closed, and the table's attention drifted with him, and Noah used the cover of it to lean toward Ava. "You okay?" he murmured. "I'm fine," she said automatically, and then catching herself. Catching the irony of saying the exact phrase the two of them had agreed was a lie, she huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "No, I'm not fine. But I'm okay. There's a difference, right? You taught me that in the car." "There's a difference," Noah agreed. "He's doing it," she whispered. "The thing. The little he's circling, he's testing the fence. He'll find a soft spot. Eventually, he always does. He'll find the one thing that he won't get to you. He always gets to me. Not tonight, Noah said. Tonight you've got a fence post that doesn't move. Look at me. She looked. I poured foundations for a living for 8 years. Before that, I held a line in places where holding the line was the only thing between a lot of people and a very bad day. He is a salesman in a nice coat. He doesn't scare me. And as long as I'm sitting next to you, he doesn't get to you. Eat your dinner. You did the hard part already. You walked in the door. The rest is just sitting here. Something in Ava's shoulders came down half an inch. She picked up her fork. You're a really good fake boyfriend, she said quietly. I keep telling you, it's the honesty, throws everybody off. For a while it was almost okay. The dinner moved, the wine flowed. Danny told 3 more stories. Frank corrected the details of all of them. The kids got loud and then got tired, and Emma Noah kept checking on Emma, and every time he looked, she was fine, better than fine. She'd attached herself to Diane and the 6-year-old, and was eating mashed potatoes with her hands and laughing at things she didn't understand completely, unaware of the quiet war being fought across the table. That was the thing that let Noah breathe. As long as Emma was okay, he could handle anything. He'd built his whole life around that single load-bearing fact. But Marcus was patient. That was what made him dangerous. He waited until the plates were being cleared, until Diane had taken a stack to the kitchen, and Frank had gone to find the good whiskey, and the table had loosened into the comfortable chaos of after dinner. And then he leaned back in his chair, swirled his wine, and turned the full beam of his attention on Ava. You seem good, Ava, he said. I mean it. You seem really good. I worried about you, you know. After. I worried you'd, I don't know, fall apart. You always had that in you, that fragile thing. But look at you. Boyfriend, family dinner, you're glowing. I'm happy for you. I am. It was poison wrapped in a compliment, and Noah watched it work. Watched the word fragile go into Ava, like a needle watched her flinch at fall apart. Watched the careful steadiness she'd rebuilt over the last hour start to crack down the middle. I'm doing well, Ava said, but it came out smaller than she wanted. You are. You really are. It's just funny because... Marcus laughed, gently, shaking his head like he was sharing a fond memory. I remember you couldn't even order at a restaurant without asking me what to get. Couldn't make a decision to save your life. Used to call me 12 times a day just to what did you used to say you felt safer when I was handling things. He smiled at Noah, including him in the joke generous warm. She's a worrier, this one. You probably know that by now. Needs a lot of reassurance, a lot of managing. I always said somebody could really take advantage of how much she needs to be told everything's fine. The table had gone quiet. Even Danny had stopped talking. Ava's face had drained of all its color, and she was looking down at her plate, and her hands had disappeared into her lap, and Noah could see her breathing again. The shallow, quick breathing, the drowning breathing, and he understood that this was the soft spot Marcus had been hunting for all night. Not her looks, not her job, not her new relationship. This. The thing Marcus had spent however many years building inside her, the belief that she was fragile, that she couldn't manage on her own, that she'd always need a man to handle her life, and that any man who had her was doing her a favor. And the most poisonous part Noah saw was that Ava half believed it. He could see her believing it. He could see 12 months of recovery start to dissolve under 30 seconds of a smiling man saying fragile and fall apart and needs to be managed in front of her whole family. Noah set down his glass. He didn't raise his voice. He'd learned a long time ago that the men who raised their voices were the ones who'd already lost the room. He spoke quietly and evenly, and the quiet of it made the whole table lean in. That's interesting, Noah said. Because that's not the woman I know. Marcus turned to him, smile still in place, but his eyes had sharpened. No. No. Noah leaned forward, forearms on the table the way Frank had, taking up his space without trying to. The woman I know knocked on a stranger's door because she needed something, and she wasn't too proud to ask. You know how rare that is. Asking for help is the hardest thing a person can do. Takes more guts than most people have. The woman I know walked into a room tonight she was scared to walk into, and she walked in anyway with her head up. The woman I know hasn't asked me what to order, what to think, or what to do one single time since I've known her. She tells me what's what. She talked the entire car ride here. He let that sit. So, I don't know who you're describing. But it isn't her. Maybe it was once. Maybe that's who she was when she was with you. People get small around the wrong people. But that's not who she is now. The table was dead silent. Marcus's smile had frozen into something that was no longer a smile. She's doing better now, Noah said, than she ever did with you. Anybody who's known her more than a month can see it. So whatever this is, this whole thing, where you sit at her family's table and call her fragile and tell her she needs managing, you can let it go. Because she's done needing whatever it is you think you gave her. Nobody breathed. Across the table, Claire had a hand over her mouth. Down the table, Frank had reappeared in the doorway with the whiskey bottle in his hand, frozen watching. And Ava. Ava had lifted her head slowly, and she was staring at Noah like he'd reached into her chest and turned a light back on. Marcus recovered fast. He had to give him that. The smile came back, but it was a different smile now with teeth in it. Wow, he said, leaning back. 2 months and you've got her all figured out, huh? That's sweet. That's really sweet. You know, the last guy thought he had her figured out too. They always do at the start. Give it time. He looked at Ava, and his voice dropped into something almost gentle, almost tender, which was the most chilling thing he'd done all night. She's good at this part, aren't you, Ava? The beginning, when everything's still a story. It's the rest she has trouble with. The part where they find out who you really are. He smiled. But hey, maybe this one's different. Maybe you finally found somebody who can put up with all of it. I really do hope so. And Noah watched the words go into Ava. Watched them aim straight for the deepest place. Not you're fragile this time, but they'll leave when they find out who you really are. The exact fear that lived underneath every other fear. The belief that she was fundamentally too much, too broken, too damaged to be stayed with. He saw it land. He saw her start to fold. So Noah did something he hadn't planned. Something that wasn't in any agreement they'd made in the car. Something that wasn't acting at all. He reached over and took Ava's hand on top of the table in front of everyone, and he held it, and he said, looking right at her, and not at Marcus at all, I already know who she really is. Ava's eyes came up to his. I've known her 2 months, Noah said, still only to her. The rest of the table gone. Marcus gone. The whole room narrowed down to her face. And I already know who she really is. And I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere. That's not a beginning of the story thing. That's just a true thing. You're not too much. You never were. Somebody just told you that you were over and over until you believed it. He squeezed her hand. It was a lie. You know that, right? It was always a lie. And here was the thing Noah didn't fully understand until the words were already out of his mouth. He wasn't performing anymore. Somewhere in the last 30 seconds, the performance had ended, and something real had walked in to take its place. And he'd stopped being a man, defending a fake girlfriend from her ex, and become a man telling a woman the truest thing he knew, and the line between those two things had dissolved completely, and he couldn't find it anymore, and he wasn't sure he wanted to. A tear slid down Ava's face. She didn't wipe it away. Yeah, she said softly, just to him. I know. Good, Noah said. The silence held for one more second, and then Frank's voice cut across the room, gruff and final, from the doorway. Marcus. Everyone turned. Frank stood there with the whiskey, and his old soldier's face was set like concrete. I think it's time you headed out, son. It's getting late. Roads are bad. Frank, come on, we were just... It's getting late, Frank said again, and there was nothing to argue with in it. Diane's got your wine. We appreciate you stopping by. Drive safe. Marcus looked around the table at Frank, immovable in the doorway. At Claire, whose eyes had turned to flint. At Diane, who had come back from the kitchen and was standing with her arms crossed. At Danny, who'd finally stopped smiling and was looking at Marcus like he was seeing him clearly for the first time. He looked at the whole family, and he saw all at once that he'd lost the room, that he'd overplayed it, that the warm crowd he'd worked so easily an hour ago had closed against him like a fist. He stood up. He buttoned his coat. The smile he put on was meant to look like he didn't care, and it almost worked, but Noah had seen a lot of men lose, and he knew what it looked like under the mask. "Merry Christmas, everybody," Marcus said. "Ava, it was good to see you. Truly." He paused at the head of the table, and for just a second, his eyes met Noah's, and the mask dropped entirely, and what was underneath was pure, cold dislike. "Take care of her," he said. "She needs a lot of taking care of." "No," Noah said quietly. "She doesn't. That's the part you never understood." Marcus held his gaze for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked out, and the front door closed behind him. And a few seconds later, they heard his car start up and pull away into the cold, and just like that, he was gone. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Danny let out a long breath and said, "Okay, I never liked that guy." And the whole table broke at once, the tension releasing in a wave of nervous laughter, everybody talking at once, Diane bustling over to fuss at Ava, Claire reaching across the table to grab her sister's other hand. And in the middle of it, Frank crossed the room, set down the whiskey, put his big hand on Noah's shoulder, and leaned down close. "Navy," he said quietly, just for Noah. "I knew there was steel in you the second you walked in. That was well done. That was exactly well done." He squeezed. "She's been lighter tonight than I've seen her in 2 years. And now I know why. You keep doing what you're doing, son." And he straightened up and announced to the room that it was time for pie, and the moment broke into motion again. But Ava hadn't moved. She was still sitting there with Noah's hand in hers, and her sister's hand in her other one, and tears were running freely down her face now, and she was looking at Noah with an expression he couldn't read. Gratitude, yes, but something else underneath it. Something that scared them both. "I need some air," she said suddenly. She let go of Claire's hand and stood. "Noah, can you? I just need a minute. Outside. Will you come?" "Yeah," Noah said. "Of course." He glanced at Emma, who was now fully asleep, curled up on the couch under a blanket. Somebody had put over her Biscuit, the dog lying on the floor beneath her, like a sentry. Diane caught his look and waved him off. "Go," she mouthed. "I've got her. Go." Ava grabbed her coat off the back of the chair. She didn't head for the front door where Marcus had gone. Instead, she went down the hall and through the kitchen to a back door that opened onto a small wooden landing, and a set of metal stairs, an old fire escape that ran down the back of the house from a second-floor addition Frank had built decades ago. The cold hit them both like a slap. The noise of the party dropped away behind the closed door, and suddenly it was just the two of them alone, the city glittering cold and enormous below their breath, steaming in the dark. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Ava gripped the metal railing with both hands and stared out at the lights, and Noah stood beside her close, but not touching, and waited, because he'd learned that some things you couldn't pull out of a person, you could only wait for. "You weren't supposed to do that," Ava said finally, her voice shaking. "In there. What you said. That wasn't the deal. The deal was you stand there and look intimidating, and we get through dinner. You weren't supposed to—" Her voice broke. "You weren't supposed to mean it." "I know," Noah said. "You weren't supposed to say I already know who she really is. You don't know who I really am. You've known me for 3 hours. The whole thing's a lie. Noah, the boyfriend thing. The 2 months, all of it. I made it up. I knocked on your door, and I made up a whole relationship because I was too ashamed to walk into my own family's house alone." The words were coming fast now, tumbling out the loud Ava from the car back, but wild now, unguarded. "And you stood up in there, and you defended me like it was real, like I was worth defending, and I can't." She turned to face him, and her face was wet and stricken in the cold light. "Why did you do that? It wasn't real. None of this is real. Why would you say something that real about something that isn't real?" And Noah looked at her. This woman he'd known for 3 hours, and somehow felt like he'd been waiting his whole life to meet, standing on a freezing fire escape on Christmas Eve with her mascara running and her family's warmth glowing through the window behind her, asking him why he'd told the truth. And he understood that they had arrived, the two of them, at the exact place where the lie ended, and the rest of their lives either began or didn't. So he told her the truth, the whole truth, the one he hadn't even told himself. "Because I didn't come here for the lie," Noah said. "What does that mean?" Ava said. "You didn't come for the lie. You came because of the lie. That was the whole. I knocked on your door and asked you to lie and you said yes. That's why you're here." "That's why I said yes," Noah said. "It's not why I came. Those are the same thing. They're not." He put his hands on the cold railing next to hers, not touching, just close. "You want to know the truth. The real one. When you knocked on my door tonight and asked me to pretend to be your boyfriend, I should have said no. I almost did say no. It was insane. You were a stranger. I had a sleeping kid. Every reasonable part of me said no." He stared out at the lights. "But there was this other part. This part I've been ignoring for 14 months because it was too dangerous to listen to. And that part heard you say 4 words, and it stood right up." "What 4 words?" "You shouldn't spend Christmas Eve alone." Ava went quiet. "I've been telling myself I was fine for 14 months, Noah said. "Since my wife walked out. I told everybody I was fine. My sister, the guys from my unit, the lady at Emma's daycare. I told myself I was fine. I built a whole life out of being fine." "Get up, make Emma breakfast, drop her off, pour concrete, pick her up, make dinner, put her to bed, sit in the dark, do it again. And I called that fine. I called that getting through it." He shook his head slowly. "And then a stranger knocks on my door on the worst night of the year and says you shouldn't spend Christmas Eve alone, and it was like somebody turned a light on in a room I'd been telling myself was empty. And I saw that it wasn't empty. It was just full of stuff I'd been refusing to look at." "Noah. So no, I didn't come for the lie. The lie was the excuse. The lie was the thing that let me say yes without admitting the real reason." He turned to look at her. "I came because I was drowning Ava. I've been drowning for 14 months and getting real good at pretending I could breathe. And you knocked on my door and offered me a few hours where I didn't have to pretend, where I could be in a warm room full of people and watch my daughter laugh and not be alone for one single night. That's why I came. Not for you, not for the lie, for that. I'm sorry if that's not. I'm sorry if that's worse somehow. But it's the truth." For a long moment, Ava didn't say anything. The wind moved through the metal stairs below them. Behind the glass, the party glowed warm and far away, like a life happening to other people. "It's not worse," she said finally. "It's the same as me." "What do you mean? I didn't knock on your door because I needed a fake boyfriend." She laughed, a small broken sound. "I mean, I did. But that's the lie I told myself. That's my version of your excuse." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "The truth is, I've been alone in that apartment across the hall for a year, ever since I finally got away from him, and I have a whole family that loves me 20 minutes across town, and I am lonelier than I have ever been in my entire life. Because the thing he did to me, the thing Marcus did, he made me afraid of people. He made me afraid of needing anybody, because needing somebody is how he got his hooks in. So I got out and I got safe, and I built this little careful life where I don't need anyone and nobody can hurt me, and you know what that is." Her voice cracked. "That's not safe. That's just a different cage. I traded a cage with a man in it for a cage with nobody in it, and I called that getting better. Ava. And then it's Christmas Eve, and I have to go to this dinner and face him, and I'm standing in my apartment terrified, and I look out my peephole and I see your light on across the hall. And I thought about you. The single dad with the kid on his hip and the 1,000-yard stare. And I didn't think there's a guy who can pretend to be my boyfriend. That's not what I thought. I thought—" She stopped, made herself say it. "I thought there's somebody who might understand. There's somebody who's as alone as I am. And I wanted God. This is embarrassing. I wanted an excuse to not be alone with you, both of us, just for one night. The boyfriend thing was just the only excuse I could think of that wouldn't make me look as pathetic as I felt. Noah stared at her. So we both used the same lie, he said slowly. To do the same thing. To not be alone. Without having to admit that's what we wanted. Pretend survivors, Ava said. I told you. Both of us walking around acting like we made it out fine. Both of us drowning in our nice safe lives. She turned to face him fully, and the cold had turned her nose and cheeks pink, and her eyes were raw, and there was nothing left of the bright, capable mask, nothing at all, just a person standing in the cold, telling the truth. So when you stood up in there and said all those things, I already know who she really is. You're not too much. I'm not going anywhere. I lost it. Because for 1 second, I forgot it was supposed to be fake. For 1 second, it felt like somebody actually meant it. And I haven't had somebody mean it in so long that I didn't know what to do with it except run out here and cry. It wasn't fake, Noah said. Don't. I'm not Ava. Listen to me. He turned, and now they were facing each other fully close, their breath mingling white in the dark. I know we made it up. I know 2 months is a lie, and the relationship's a lie, and all of it's a lie. But what I said at that table wasn't about the lie. I wasn't defending a fake girlfriend. I was watching a man try to make a real person believe she was small, and I couldn't sit there and let it happen because it wasn't true, and I could see it wasn't true. Everything I said about you, I'd seen with my own eyes in 3 hours. You asked for help. You walked in scared and did it anyway. You stopped letting him make you smaller halfway through dinner. I didn't make any of that up. The frame was fake. What was inside the frame was the realest thing I've felt in over a year. Ava was crying now, openly, not bothering to hide it. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't do this again. You don't understand. The last time I let myself feel something for somebody, I lost 4 years of my life and most of who I was. I can't. I have a system. I have a careful little life. I don't get to want things. Noah wanting things is how it starts. I know, Noah said. You don't. I do. His voice was rough. You think I'm not scared? You think I didn't stand in my apartment 14 months ago and watch the one person I built my whole world around pick up 2 suitcases and walk out the door like she was returning library books? You think I don't know exactly what it costs to want somebody and have them leave? I have a 4-year-old who asks me every single night if I'm going to leave too. Every night, Ava. Because the one thing she's learned about love so far is that it walks out the door. I'm not scared of a little. I'm terrified. I've spent 14 months making sure I never have to feel that again, and I did it the exact same way you did. I built a careful little life where I don't need anybody but Emma, and I called it strength. He let out a breath. It's not strength. It's just a different way of being a coward. I figured that out about an hour into your family's dinner, watching my kid laugh at a dog, realizing I'd forgotten what it felt like to be in a room that was actually alive. So what are we supposed to do with that? Ava said helplessly. We're 2 terrified people who built 2 careful cages, and we're standing on a fire escape admitting we both want the same thing, and we're both too scared to... I know what I'm supposed to do with it, Noah said. What? Stop being a coward. And he kissed her. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't smooth, and it wasn't for show. There was no one to perform for out here, no family at the window, no Marcus to convince, just the 2 of them, and the cold and the city below. He kissed her, and for a second Ava went rigid, and Noah started to pull back, started to say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. And then her hands came up and grabbed the front of his sweater, the blue sweater his ex-wife had given him 2 Christmases ago, and she pulled him back in and kissed him like a person who'd been holding her breath for a year and had finally been allowed to exhale. When they broke apart, they were both shaking and not from the cold. That wasn't for show, Ava whispered. No, Noah said. There's nobody out here to show. That was real. That was real. She let out a breath that was half laugh and half sob, and pressed her forehead against his chest, and Noah wrapped his arms around her, and for a moment, they just stood there, 2 people who'd spent a combined 2.5 years drowning quietly, holding on to each other on a fire escape on Christmas Eve, like the only solid thing in a freezing world. I stopped being okay a long time ago, Noah said into her hair. quiet, the thing he'd never said out loud to anyone. And the messed up part is, I didn't even know it. I thought I was fine because I wasn't falling apart. I thought as long as I could get Emma to school and pour the concrete and keep the lights on, that was the same as being okay. It's not. I haven't been okay in 14 months, and I genuinely didn't know it until tonight. Ava pulled back to look at him. Her face was wet and red and wrecked, and Noah thought she had never looked more like a real person in the whole 3 hours he'd known her. Then we're both pretending survivors, she said. Yeah, Noah said. Yeah, we are. And now what? We've admitted it. We're standing here. What happens now? The fear was still in her voice, but it had changed shape. It wasn't the fear that wanted to run anymore. It was the fear that wanted to be told it was safe to stay. Because I have to tell you, Noah, I am not a casual person. I can't do a casual thing. I don't have a casual setting. If I let myself feel this, if this is real, then it's real, and I will need it to mean something, and I will be devastated if it turns out to be one weird magical Christmas Eve that we never talk about again. So you have to tell me right now, is this a thing that happened, or is this a thing that's happening? Noah looked at her, and he thought about Emma asleep on the couch behind the glass under a stranger's blanket with a dog guarding her. The first time in 14 months, he'd watched his daughter sleep somewhere that wasn't their cold apartment and felt like she was safe. He thought about the careful half-dead life waiting for him across the hall. He thought about how easy it would be to say, let's just see to keep one foot out the door to protect himself the way he'd been protecting himself, and how that protection had nearly killed something in him without him even noticing. It's a thing that's happening, he said. Don't say that because I'm crying. Don't say it because it's Christmas and you feel bad. Ava. He took her face in both his hands gently, his rough concrete worker's hands cradling her cold, wet face, and he made her look at him. I have a 4-year-old. I don't get to do casual either. I don't get to bring something into my life that's going to walk back out because she's the one who'll pay for it, not me. So believe me when I tell you, I would not be standing here saying this if I didn't mean it all the way down. I don't have the luxury of meaning things halfway. Not anymore. Everything I do for, keeps now, because there's a little girl asleep in there who can't afford anything else. He brushed a tear off her cheek with his thumb. So yeah, it's a thing that's happening. If you want it to be. It's terrifying, and it's insane. And we met 3 hours ago, and I don't care. It's happening. Ava closed her eyes. A long shudder went through her, and Noah felt it as the moment something let go inside her, some braced and frozen thing that had been clenched tight for years, finally loosening. Okay, she whispered. Okay. It's happening. And then she laughed, a real laugh, wet and surprised and slightly hysterical. Oh my God. My mother is going to be insufferable. She's going to say she knew. She didn't know anything, the whole thing was fake, but she's going to say she knew the second you pulled out my chair. I'm not telling her it was fake. We are absolutely never telling her it was fake. We're taking that to our graves. Ava wiped her face, smearing what was left of her makeup completely. God, I look like a raccoon. I cannot go back in there looking like this. Claire will know something happened. Claire already knows something happened. Claire's known since the drinks table. What do you mean Claire's known since the drinks table? She cornered me earlier. I told her the truth. Not the fake boyfriend truth, the actual truth that I didn't know much about you, but I knew somebody had hurt you, and I wasn't going to let anything happen to you tonight. She liked that. She told me to stay close to you when Marcus showed up. She's been on our side the whole time. Noah paused. Well, your side. I wasn't on a side 3 hours ago. I think I'm on a side now. Ava stared at him. You told my suspicious sister a version of the truth, and it made her trust you. I keep telling you, honest people make the best fake boyfriends. He almost smiled. Turns out they make even better real ones. That undid her completely. She laughed and cried at the same time and hit him in the chest, not hard, and then left her hand there flat against the blue sweater over his heart. And they stood like that for a while longer. The cold sharp around them, the warmth glowing behind the glass. neither of them in a hurry to go back inside, because back inside the night would keep moving. And out here it was suspended. This one impossible perfect moment where two drowning people had reached across the dark and grabbed onto each other, and for the first time in a long time found something that held. "Can I ask you something?" Ava said finally. "Yeah." "Emma's mom, your wife. You said she walked out 14 months ago. Do you still—" She stopped unsure. "I don't want to ask the wrong thing, but I have to know what I'm standing next to. Are you still in love with her? Is this a thing where I'm going to be competing with a ghost?" Noah considered it. He'd promised her the truth, all of it, and he wasn't going to start hedging now. "No," he said. "I don't think I'm in love with her anymore. I think I stopped being in love with her a while before she even left, honestly. We'd been roommates raising a kid for a long time before she actually walked out. What I've been carrying isn't love, it's the wound. There's a difference, and it took me a long time to figure that out. I'm not heartbroken over Sarah. I'm heartbroken over what it did to Emma and what it did to my idea of myself, the idea that I was a guy people stayed for. That's the part that's been killing me. Not missing her, just finding out I was leavable. That after everything, after war, after all of it, I was a guy somebody could just put down and walk away from." He shook his head. "You're not competing with a ghost. There's no ghost. There's just a guy who's been scared for 14 months that the problem was him, that he's fundamentally the kind of person people leave. You're not," Ava said immediately fiercely. "Noah, you're God. You're the opposite of that. You're the kind of person who shows up. You showed up tonight for a stranger. You stayed at a table and took fire from a guy you'd never met to protect somebody you'd known 3 hours. You've spent 14 months building your entire life around never letting your daughter feel left. You are not a person people leave because there's something wrong with you. She left because there was something wrong with her, or with the situation, or with the timing, but it was not because you're leavable. You're the most stayable person I've ever met. That's the actual problem with you. You make people want to stay so bad it scares them." Noah looked at her for a long moment. "That's a hell of a thing to say to a guy on a fire escape." "It's true. You've known me 3 hours. So have you. And you stood up at my family's dinner table and told me you knew who I really was. Apparently 3 hours is enough." She wiped her eyes one more time and squared her shoulders, and some of the bright, capable Ava came back. But it wasn't a mask this time. Noah could tell the difference now. It was the real thing. The loudness from the car, the actual person underneath, coming back online now that the frozen thing inside her had finally let go. "Okay, we should go back in. Emma's asleep and it's late, and my mother is going to send a search party." "But Noah," she caught his hand. "When we go back in there, I'm not pretending anymore. I can't. I'm done pretending tonight. So if my mom asks how we met, we tell her the truth, the across the hall part. And if she asks how long, I'm going to say something vague, because 3 hours is going to give my father a heart attack. But everything else, everything we tell them from now on, it's real. Deal." "Deal," Noah said. "And tomorrow?" She took a breath. "Tomorrow's Christmas. And you and Emma are going to wake up across the hall in that cold apartment, and I'm going to wake up alone in mine, and I don't want that. Is that crazy? After one night, I don't want to wake up alone on Christmas tomorrow knowing you're 20 feet away waking up alone too. That seems insane. We just spent the whole night talking about how scared we both are, and now I'm inviting myself to your Christmas morning. Come over," Noah said. "What?" "Tomorrow, Christmas morning, come over. I've got 2 badly wrapped presents for Emma, and a plan to make pancakes, and it's the kind of thing that's been breaking my heart to do alone for 14 months. So come over. Watch her open her presents. Eat bad pancakes. Don't wake up alone." He squeezed her hand. "We've already done the hard part, Ava. We already told each other the truth. Christmas morning's the easy part." Ava's eyes filled again, but she was smiling now. A real, full, unguarded smile, the kind Noah suspected Marcus had spent 4 years trying to put out and had never quite managed to. "Okay," she said. "Yeah, okay. I'll come over. I'll bring syrup. Your pancakes are probably terrible." My pancakes are extremely terrible. I burn the first 4 every single time. Then I'm definitely coming over. Somebody has to save those children from your pancakes. They were both laughing now, the kind of laughing that comes loose after a long cry when the back door opened behind them, and Claire stuck her head out into the cold, took one look at the two of them. Ava's wrecked makeup, Noah's hand in hers, the way they were standing, the whole obvious truth of it, and didn't say a word about any of it. Mom made coffee and there's pie, Claire said. And Emma woke up for about 30 seconds, asked where her daddy was. I told her you were outside, and she said, "Okay, tell him I'm having pie," and went right back to sleep on the dog. So, whenever you two are done freezing to death out here being dramatic, there's a kid inside eating her body weight in pie and a family that would very much like to meet the real version of whatever this is. She raised an eyebrow. And it's real now, right? Because I called it at the drinks table, and I would like that on the record. Noah looked at Ava. Ava looked at Noah. "It's real," Ava said. "Knew it," Claire said, and disappeared back inside. And through the open door came the warmth and the noise and the light, the whole glowing machinery of a family on Christmas Eve. And somewhere in the middle of it, a 4-year-old girl asleep on a dog safe, warm surrounded, dreaming whatever 4-year-olds dream when for the first time in a long time they aren't afraid. Noah took a breath. The cold went all the way down into his lungs, and for once it didn't feel like enduring. It felt like being alive. "Come on," he said, and he kept her hand in his, and he didn't let go. "Let's go have pie with your crazy family." And the two of them turned together away from the cold and the dark, and the long, careful, lonely lives they'd each built like fortresses, and walked back through the door into the light. The pancakes the next morning were terrible. Noah burned the first 4 exactly as promised, and Emma sat at the kitchen counter in her reindeer pajamas, declaring each ruined one the worst pancake in the world, with the gleeful brutality only a 4-year-old can manage, and Ava stood at the stove in a borrowed t-shirt of Noah's and her dress from the night before, taking the spatula out of his hand and saying, "Okay, give me that you clearly weren't lying about being a disaster." And the cold apartment that had been a tomb for 14 months was suddenly full of smoke and laughter, and the smell of syrup. And Noah stood in the middle of his own kitchen and felt like he'd walked into someone else's life by mistake. A better life. A life that had been waiting on the other side of a door he'd been too afraid to open. Emma opened her 2 badly wrapped presents and loved them with the totality that small children bring to everything. And then Ava produced a 3rd present from her bag. A stuffed dog Golden, exactly like Biscuit. And Emma looked at it, and then looked at Ava and said, "You got me, Biscuit," in a voice of pure astonishment, and Ava said, "I got you a biscuit you can keep." And Emma climbed off the stool and walked straight over and hugged Ava around the legs. And Noah had to turn around and pretend to be very busy with the pancakes for a minute, because the sight of his daughter hugging this woman who'd knocked on their door 18 hours ago undid something in him that he didn't have a name for. "Daddy's crying at the stove," Emma announced. "Daddy's not crying. There's smoke." "You're crying." "It's the smoke, Emma. Ava is Daddy crying." Ava looked over at Noah at his back, at the way his shoulders had gone tight, the way they did when he was holding something in, and her face went soft. "No, baby," she said gently. "Your daddy's just really happy. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. It's a weird thing we do." "That's dumb," Emma said. "It really is," Ava agreed. "Eat your terrible pancake." That was the first morning. There were a lot of mornings after it, and not all of them were like that one. Because the thing nobody tells you about 2 drowning people deciding to hold on to each other is that holding on is the easy part. The water doesn't go away just because you've found someone to hold. Noah learned that over the weeks and months that followed, learned it the hard way, the way he learned everything. There was the night in February when Ava's phone buzzed at 11 p.m. with an unknown number, and Noah watched the color drain out of her face, watched her go small and still, in a way he'd only seen once before at her family's dinner table, and he understood, without being told, that it was Marcus, or that she was afraid it was Marcus, and that 4 years of damage didn't undo itself just because somebody had stood up for her at a Christmas dinner. She didn't answer it. She sat on his couch with the phone face down on the cushion and her arms wrapped around herself, and Noah didn't crowd her, didn't try to fix it, just sat down next to her at a careful distance and said, "You don't have to answer that. You don't ever have to answer that. And if he ever shows up, you have me, and you have Frank, and you have Claire, and that man would have to be out of his mind to come within a mile of this family." And Ava had cried. Not the good kind of crying, the old kind, the kind that came from the deep place, and Noah had let her. And somewhere around midnight, she'd said very quietly, "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot. I know I'm a lot." He always said, and Noah had cut her off, gentle but absolute, "I already know who you really are. We settled that on a fire escape. He doesn't get a vote anymore." It turned out to be a wrong number, but the fear was real and it lived in her, and Noah learned to live alongside it without ever once making her feel like it made her less. And there was the night in March when it was Noah who came apart, when Emma had a nightmare and woke up screaming for her mother. Not for Daddy, for Mommy, for the woman who'd walked out and never looked back. And Noah had held his sobbing daughter at 3 a.m. while she cried for someone who wasn't coming. And after she finally fell back asleep, he'd walked into the kitchen and found himself shaking the old wound torn wide open. The voice in his head that said, "You're leavable. You're not enough. Even your own kid wants the one who left." And Ava, who'd started staying over, who'd heard the whole thing from the bedroom, came out and found him gripping the counter, the same way he'd gripped it the night they met. And she didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. And she didn't say she didn't mean it, because Emma was 4 and meaning had nothing to do with it. She just came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his back and pressed her face between his shoulder blades and said, "She cried for her mom because her mom is the wound. You're not the wound, Noah. You're the one who stays. Kids cry for the wound at 3 a.m. They build their whole lives on the one who stays. You'll see. Give it time. You'll see." And he had seen. Slowly. Over months. He'd seen Emma stop asking if he was going to leave. He'd seen her stop asking about her mother at all, not because she'd forgotten, but because the hole had filled in with something else, with pancakes and a stuffed dog named Biscuit, and a woman who showed up and kept showing up and never once picked up a suitcase. They argued too. They were both stubborn, both scarred, both fluent in the particular language of people who'd learned to protect themselves by going cold. There was a fight in April so bad that Ava went back to her own apartment across the hall and slept there for 2 nights, and Noah lay awake both nights 20 feet away, convinced he'd ruined it. Convinced this was the part where she left because everyone left. That was the one true thing he knew about love. And on the 3rd morning, there was a knock on his door, and he opened it, and Ava was standing there in the hallway, exactly where she'd stood the first night. And she said, "I'm not knocking to ask you to pretend anything. I'm knocking because I went home to prove to myself I still could, that I didn't need you, that I wasn't doing the thing I swore I'd never do again. And I proved it. I can survive across the hall. I just don't want to." She'd swallowed hard. There's a difference between needing somebody because you're trapped and choosing somebody because they're home. He made me think those were the same thing. They're not. You're not a cage, Noah. You're a home. And I'd like to come home if you'll still have me. And Noah had pulled her across the threshold and into the apartment that had stopped being a tomb, and neither of them slept across the hall from each other ever again. The breakthrough, the real one, the one that turned a fragile thing into a permanent one, didn't come in a single dramatic moment. That was the part Noah hadn't expected. He'd spent his whole life in a world of single dramatic moments. The deployment, the firefight, the wedding, the day Sarah walked out. He'd thought love would be like that, a moment you could point to. But this wasn't that. This was 1,000 small mornings. It was Ava learning how Emma liked her sandwiches cut, and Emma learning to call out Ava instead of Daddy when she scraped her knee, and Noah learning that he could come home from a job site exhausted and gray and walk into a kitchen full of noise and not have to perform being okay, because for the first time in years, he actually was. It was Frank teaching Noah to build a birdhouse, and the two old soldiers spending whole Saturdays in companionable silence in the garage. It was Diane calling every Sunday, and Claire becoming the sister Noah never had. It was the slow, unglamorous, miraculous accumulation of a life. By summer, they'd started looking at houses. Not the fancy kind. Neither of them had the money for fancy, and neither of them wanted it. They wanted a yard for Emma, a real kitchen, a second bedroom that wasn't partitioned off with a bookshelf. They wanted a front door that opened onto something other than a hallway with a tomb across it. They looked at a dozen places that were wrong, and then in September, they walked into a small two-story on a quiet street. Nothing special. Peeling paint on the porch rail, and a water stain on the upstairs ceiling, and a backyard that had gone to weeds. And Emma ran straight through the empty rooms, shrieking with joy, and claimed a bedroom by lying down on the floor of it and refusing to move. And Ava stood in the kitchen and got very quiet, and Noah came up beside her and said, "What is it?" And Ava said, "It's not perfect. There's a water stain. The porch needs work. The yard's a disaster." And Noah said, "Yeah." And Ava said, "I love it so much I can't breathe." And they bought it. It was not a polished house. They never made it polished. The porch rail got fixed, but the yard stayed half wild because Emma liked it that way, liked having a jungle to play explorer in. The water stain got painted over and came back twice more before they fixed the actual leak. There was always something, a faucet dripping a door that stuck a winter when the heater died, and they all three slept in the living room by the fireplace, and Emma declared it the best night of her life. It was a real house with real problems, full of real people who stayed. And that was the thing Noah kept coming back to. The thing he turned over in his mind on the long drives home from job sites. The thing he'd spent 8 years in the Navy and 14 months in a cold apartment, never managing to understand. He'd thought for most of his life that strength was about what you could endure alone. That the measure of a man was how much weight he could carry without help, how long he could hold a line by himself, how well he could convince the world he was fine when he wasn't. He'd built his whole identity on it. "I'm fine. I've got it. I don't need anybody." He'd worn it like armor right up until the night a stranger in a green coat knocked on his door and accidentally showed him that the armor had become a coffin. What he understood now, what it had taken a fake relationship and a real one and 1,000 small mornings to teach him, was that there was no strength in enduring alone. None. Enduring alone was just slow drowning with good posture. The actual strength, the hard thing, the thing that took more courage than any deployment, was letting somebody in. Was knocking on a door or answering one. Was sitting at a stranger's table and letting their warmth touch the frozen place. Was telling the truth on a fire escape when every instinct screamed to keep pretending. Was choosing every single morning to stay and to let yourself be stayed for. That was the part nobody had ever taught him. Not the Navy, not survival, not all those long nights of proving how much he could take. They'd taught him how to last. They'd never taught him how to live. He'd had to learn that from a woman who'd been just as lost as he was, and from a 4-year-old who'd never stopped believing that love was supposed to fill a house instead of empty it. Christmas Eve came around again. A whole year, almost to the day, from the night Ava had knocked on his door. They spent it at Frank and Diane's, the way they'd spend every Christmas Eve for the rest of their lives, though they didn't fully know that yet. The same house lit up like a postcard, the same chaos of cousins, and the same too loud Danny, and the same birdhouse building Frank, and the same enormous fat dog, older, now slower, but still the first thing Emma ran to when they came through the door. Diane cried when they arrived the way she did about everything now, and hugged Noah so hard he lost his breath, and whispered in his ear, "I knew. The first night. The second you pulled out her chair, I knew." And Noah didn't tell her, would never tell her that the first night had been a lie. Because it hadn't been, not really. The frame had been fake. Everything inside it had been the truest thing he'd ever done. The dinner was loud and warm, and exactly like the year before, except for everything that was different. Emma wasn't shy this time. Emma owned the place, ran the pack of cousins, sat at the big kid end of the table, and ate her body weight in mashed potatoes. Ava wasn't bracing for a knock at the door, wasn't watching the entrance with that flat frozen fear, because Marcus wasn't coming, would never be coming again, had been quietly and permanently uninvited from every gathering this family would ever have. And Noah. Noah wasn't sitting at the table playing a part gripping a stranger's hand under the tablecloth performing a closeness he didn't feel. He was just there. He belonged there. He'd earned it the slow way, the real way, over a year of showing up. After dinner, when the pie was gone, and the kids had crashed, and the adults had scattered into the comfortable post-meal drift, Noah found himself out on the back fire escape again. The same metal stairs, the same cold, the same city glittering below. He hadn't planned to go out there. His feet had just carried him the way they sometimes did, to the place where everything had changed. And he stood at the railing where they'd stood a year ago, and he looked out at the lights, and he let himself feel the full size of the year. The door opened behind him. He knew it was her before she spoke. "I figured I'd find you out here," Ava said. She had her coat on, the green one, the same one, and she came to stand beside him at the rail, close, their shoulders touching. "You okay?" "You disappeared." "I'm okay," Noah said. And then, because they'd made a promise a year ago on these exact stairs to never lie to each other again, he said. "Better than okay, actually. That's still strange to say. I keep waiting for it to be a lie." "It's not a lie. I know. That's what is strange about it." He turned to look at her. A year ago, she'd been standing in the same spot with her mascara running and her family's warmth glowing behind glass, asking him why he'd told the truth about something that wasn't real. Now her face was calm and open and lined faintly with a year of actual happiness, and there was nothing frozen left in it anywhere. "You want to hear something insane? Always. A year ago tonight, I was sitting in that apartment across the hall eating bread off the counter because I couldn't bring myself to sit at the table. And I genuinely believed that was the rest of my life. Not as a tragedy. That's the part that gets me. I didn't think this is so sad. I thought this is just how it is now. I'd made peace with it. I'd decided that a cold apartment and a microwave dinner and a kid who asked me every night if I was going to leave was the deal, and my job was just to endure it as well as I could for as long as I could." He shook his head slowly. "I'd given up. I didn't even know I'd given up. That's the thing about giving up quietly. You can do it without ever noticing you did it. And then I knocked on your door. And then you knocked on my door," Noah said, "with the single most insane request anyone's ever made of me. And I said yes for all the wrong reasons, or what I thought were the wrong reasons. And it turned out to be the only right thing I've done in years." He reached over and took her hand the same way he had at her family's table a year ago. Except there was no one watching now, no part to play. Just two people on a fire escape who'd decided to stay. "You didn't just change one night, Ava. You want to know what you did? You knocked on the door of a man who'd quietly decided to spend the rest of his life enduring, and you accidentally reminded him he was allowed to live. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. That's everything." Ava's eyes filled, but she was smiling the full, unguarded smile, the one that had taken months to fully come back, and now lived on her face like it had never left. "You know what's funny? I came to your door that night thinking I needed someone to protect me from Marcus. To stand next to me so I wouldn't have to face him alone. And you did. You stood up at that table, and you took him apart with about 6 sentences. She laughed softly. "But that's not what you actually saved me from. He was already gone, really. He'd been gone a year. What you saved me from was the thing I'd built after him. The careful little cage. The life where I didn't need anybody so nobody could ever hurt me again. I was so proud of that cage. I thought it was healing. It was just a nicer prison." She squeezed his hand. "You didn't save me from Marcus, Noah. You saved me from the person I'd turned into to survive Marcus. And I didn't even know I needed saving from her until you showed me there was a whole life on the other side of the bars." "Pretend survivors," Noah said quietly. "Pretend survivors." Ava agreed. "Except we're not pretending anymore. We're just survivors now, actual ones, the kind that made it out and built something on the other side." She leaned her head against his shoulder. Look at us. We have a house with a water stain and a wild backyard, and a kid who calls us both when she scrapes her knee. We have terrible pancakes every Sunday because you still burn the first 4, and I let you because Emma thinks it's a tradition now. We have my insane family, and my dad's birdhouses, and a fat old dog we're going to inherit the second my mother admits she's too tired to take care of him. She lifted her head and looked at him. Did you ever in a million years, standing in that cold apartment eating bread, think you'd have this? No, Noah said honestly. I'd stopped being able to imagine it. That's what 14 months of enduring does. It doesn't just make the present cold. It kills your ability to picture anything else. I couldn't see this if I'd tried. I didn't have the equipment anymore. And now I can't picture anything else, he said. That's the part that scares me even now. I've built my whole life around this, around you, around Emma, around Sunday pancakes, and your dad's garage and a house full of noise. I don't have a backup plan anymore. I don't have one foot out the door. For a guy who spent 14 months making sure he could survive losing everything that's terrifying. He looked at her. But I wouldn't go back. Not for anything. The careful version of me that could survive losing everything he wasn't alive, Ava. He was just hard to kill. There's a difference. I'd rather be alive and breakable than safe and half dead. You taught me that. You and a 4-year-old and your whole crazy family. The back door opened again, and small running footsteps came across the landing, and Emma appeared between them, wide awake again, despite the late hour, pushing her way to the railing to stand in the gap between them, and both of them automatically reached down to make sure she didn't get too close to the edge. A thing they did now, without thinking, the four-handed reflex of two people who'd decided to keep one small person safe for the rest of their lives. What are you guys doing out here? Emma demanded. It's cold. Grandma says come in for hot chocolate. She'd started calling Diane Grandma somewhere around the summer, and no one had corrected her, and Diane had cried for an hour the first time. Why are you out in the cold? It's Christmas. We're just talking, baby, Noah said. About what? Noah looked at Ava over the top of his daughter's head. A year ago, he'd stood in this exact spot and told a woman he barely knew the truest thing he'd ever said. Now he looked down at the little girl between them, the one who'd asked him every single night for over a year whether he was going to leave, and who hadn't asked him that question in months, because somewhere in the last year she'd simply stopped being afraid of it. And he understood that this was the answer to everything, that the whole long, brutal road had led to a 4-year-old who'd forgotten to be afraid. We're talking about how lucky we are, Noah said. To have you, and Ava, and Grandma's hot chocolate. That's dumb, Emma said. Talking about being lucky is dumb. Come inside and be lucky where it's warm. And she grabbed both their hands, one in each of hers, and tugged with the absolute certainty of a child who'd never once doubted that the two adults on either side of her would follow wherever she pulled. And they followed. Of course they followed. At the door, Noah paused for just a second and looked back at the fire escape, at the cold and the dark and the city glittering below, at the place where his life had cracked open a year ago and let the light in. He thought about the man he'd been on the other side of that crack, the one eating bread over a counter, the one who'd called slow drowning being fine, the one who genuinely believed that the measure of a man was how much he could endure alone. He didn't hate that man. He'd needed that man to survive long enough to make it here. But he didn't want to be him anymore. And the miracle, the actual miracle, was that he didn't have to be. He'd spent 8 years in the Navy learning how to survive. He'd spent 14 months in a cold apartment learning how to endure. And it had taken a stranger's desperate knock on Christmas Eve to finally teach him the one thing none of it ever had, the only lesson that had ever really mattered. Home was never a place. It was never the apartment, or the house, or the partitioned bedroom. It was never something you could buy or build or pour a foundation for. Home was the people who stayed. It was the woman who knocked and then never left, and the daughter who stopped being afraid, and the loud, crazy family that pulled up a chair without being asked. Home was the ones who stayed, and Noah Carter, former Navy, former husband, former drowning man, finally, after all of it, had a home full of them. He stepped inside into the warmth and the noise and the light, and he closed the cold door behind him, and he was never alone again.